Well, let's get more on this from the former US ambassador to NATO. That's Ivo Dalder. A very good evening to you, or afternoon as it is there across the pond. First of all, just on what happened today in terms of seizing these oil tankers, what's your thought on that? Is this just a show of American might and further pressure on Venezuela?
I do, and I think the defense secretary's statement was very clever in trying to distance the activity that happened off the coast of the UK from what's happening in Venezuela. But this is what it is all about. It's about oil. The reason that we went into Venezuela was not because of drugs, not because of immigration, certainly not because of democracy, but because Venezuela sits on a lot of oil. And the president of the United States, in his imperial pursuits in the region, believes that it's now time for him to grab that oil. This is one way to do it. You take ships that are at the high seas, you bring them, as I'm sure will happen with this one, to U.S. ports, offload the oil, and sell it on the market. That's, in fact, what they're planning to do with all of the Venezuelan oil.
And what does this then mean for NATO? An exercise like today, Britain clearly played a small part in it. I'm sure that was a political decision to show that the UK are willing or is willing to support America where it thinks potentially it's within Britain's view of international law and the objectives are aligned. Is that potentially where NATO may well end up, where it helps out the United States when it feels like it can and it should, rather than it always will?
Well, clearly, it's hard to argue that this was a threat to NATO security. So this is really a bilateral U.S.-UK decision. I do think that there is an effort on the part of the UK, on the part of most of our allies, to bend over backwards to try to be nice to Donald Trump, to flatter him in the many ways that we've seen over the last 12 months, in order to ensure that the United States remains a reliable and good ally that Europe can depend on when it comes for their security. The issue of Greenland really throws a significant monkey wrench into that entire process, because the president of the United States says that we can only be secure if we actually own the country and the territory that we need to defend, which basically suggests that it can't be secure for countries that are not part of the United States. And that goes to the fundamental the fundamental core of this alliance, which is that security of one is the same as security for all. And to suggest that NATO territory, in this case Greenland, can only be secure if it's part of the United States, suggests that if you're not part of the United States is not going to defend you. That's, I think, where we are today. It's a very troubling situation. And for the President of the United States to make these kinds of statements in the 21st century is remarkable indeed.
In simple terms, you're saying that if the United States were to do anything in Greenland, in terms of that was against the wishes of the Danish or the Greenland government, effectively that would be the end of NATO?
Well, it would be the end of the U.S. commitment to European security. Clearly, as Prime Minister Frederiksen has said yesterday or the day before, any attack of one NATO country to conquer another part of a NATO country would be contrary to anything that the alliance stands for. And so at the very least, the United States could no longer be relied upon. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of NATO. There are still 31 other members of NATO who could decide that they do believe that their security is fundamentally tied with the security of all other members, but relying on the United States would become increasingly difficult, which is why it is so important for Europe to start investing in its own defense and to reduce its dependence on the United States. And ultimately, that is going to be a better way to ensure European security than hoping that flattery and perhaps participating in military operations, as we have seen just today, will be sufficient for the United States to remain engaged. I don't think this president is serious about defending Europe, I'm afraid to say. And as a result, I think getting serious about defending oneself is more important than ever.
And just very finally on this, President Trump is, of course, President of the United States, but there are other politicians in the United States, and in theory, at least, he, can only be in power for 3 more years, and we've got midterm elections. What I'm trying to get at here is what do other politicians, particularly Republican politicians, think about all of this? You know, NATO's been the backbone, as you say, of not just European security, but American security for the best part of 75 years. What's the view among particularly senior Republicans of what President Trump is up to at the moment?
I think senior Republicans are quietly appalled by what they are seeing. This is not the kind of behavior that they have long supported from the United States. Democratic and Republican presidents have been fully committed to NATO, and they have been fully committed to believing that European security is fundamental to American security. The problem is that they're not willing to say so out loud. The problem is that they're not willing to stand up to the president and say, you know, you are fundamentally going against the very values that our country and indeed our party stand for. And it is the lack of that opposition, and it's the inability to say things out loud or even privately to the president of the United States that what he's doing is contrary to American interest that raises the fundamental question about America's continued reliability, no matter who is president. So long as a shift in 40,000 votes can lead you to the election of somebody like Donald Trump, it's going to be hard to say we're going to rely on the United States for our security. It's just too narrow a margin, and that's the problem we're facing.
Okay, Ivo Delda, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, thank you very much indeed, live for us from Chicago tonight. And that story, of course, going to feature in tomorrow's papers on